At my sister's lavish party, my own parents called me useless and had security throw me out like a stranger. I stayed silent, but that night I froze every account, canceled their trips, and sold my $19 million stake. Minutes later, 96 calls came flooding in. At my sister's glittering party, my own mother called me useless, and my father ordered security to drag me out like a stranger. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I went home, froze every account, canceled their trips, and sold my $19 million stake out from under them. Minutes later, 96 calls lit up my phone, but none of them said the one thing I'd wanted to hear my whole life. Before we dive in, what time is it where you are and where are you listening from? Drop it in the comments. I want to know. The valet line curled along the portico like a ribbon of chrome and perfume. I eased my car forward and handed off the keys, trying not to notice the way the attendant checked my make and model before he checked my face. Inside, the ballroom was all gold leaf and chandeliers, a quartet in the corner sawing something elegant, while servers floated past with champagne flutes. It was the kind of room that tells you who belongs before anyone says a word. I smoothed the skirt of my navy dress and stepped in. Cousins who hadn't called me in years suddenly remembered how to look through me. A great aunt tilted her head as if she were trying to place me from a high school yearbook. My sister's friends, new money wrapped in old money colors, clustered near the stage, trading compliments loud enough to be heard. Meredith, my mother said, arriving with a smile that stopped at her teeth. Her pearls were bigger than I remembered. Her eyes flicked over my dress, my shoes, my hair. You made it. I did, I answered. Happy birthday to Cassandra. She took my elbow, steering me with 2 fingers like I was a shopping cart. Just try not to make tonight about you. I'm here to celebrate her, I said. It was true. I never came to start a fire. I came to see if there was anything left to save. The stage lights shifted. A slideshow of Cassandra's victories lit the far wall. Magazine covers, ribbon cuttings, charity galas where I stood 2 rows back holding coats and purses. People clapped like it was church. I waited for my sister to look my way. She didn't. I moved toward her anyway. Polite steps, glass in hand, ready to say happy birthday and go home. That was the plan. Keep it short. Keep it clean. My mother stepped between us so smoothly I almost laughed. You're useless, Meredith, she said, voice pleasant and pitched so the nearest tables would hear. Just stay in the corner and don't embarrass us. It landed like a slap. Someone inhaled. Someone else set a glass down too hard. A cousin stared into his phone as if there were breaking news in the weather app. I held my smile where it was and felt the clutch bite into my palm. I came to wish her well, I said quietly. My mother's brows lifted. Be kind and don't make a scene. We all know that's difficult for you. Difficult. I swallowed the word before it could lodge anywhere permanent. A picture from another year flashed through my head. Another stage, another speech. The same arrangement of people applauding the idea of family while ignoring the body of it. Back then, I told myself patience would change something. Tonight, patience felt like a rope. Cassandra turned, glitter on her eyelids, the kind of smile people practice in mirrors. Mom, is everything okay? She asked, already angling away. Everything's fine, my mother said without taking her eyes off me. Then she lifted one hand, a conductor dismissing a section, and my father looked up from the head table. He didn't bother with a smile. He didn't walk over. He just crooked a finger at a security guard and said in that voice he used at board meetings, She's not welcome here. Escort her out. A hush followed the words like a shadow. The quartet kept playing because that's what professionals do. Guests turned their bodies so they could pretend to be looking elsewhere while still catching the show. The guard arrived, respectful, apologetic, steady. Ma'am, he murmured, would you come with me? I could have asked why. I could have explained. I could have pointed to the checks I wrote, the nights I handled payroll so the lights stayed on. Instead, I looked at my father across the room. He didn't blink. I let my jaw soften into something almost like a smile, small, private, and nodded to the guard. "It's fine," I said. "I'm leaving." My heels clicked on the marble as we crossed that glittering desert. Halfway to the doors, I set my untouched champagne on a tray. The server flinched like the stem might explode. Behind me, someone whispered, "What did she do?" Someone else said, "You know how she is." It was always easier to fill in blanks with the worst story. Outside, the air was cooler, honest. The valet jogged to fetch my car. The fountain in the drive threw up diamonds. I slid into the driver's seat, shut the door, and let the silence put its hands on my shoulders. It held me there long enough to hear my own breath even out. On the dash, the clock ticked past 9. If I drove straight home, I could still put in a load of laundry and pretend this was a normal night. My fingers didn't move toward the ignition. They went for my phone, not to call anyone, not to defend myself or ask for an explanation. I opened the banking app and watched the numbers populate. Joint accounts I had once agreed to for convenience. Travel itineraries booked under my card because I got the points. Contract folders tied to my email because it was easier if you just handle it, sweetheart. The ledger of a decade of being helpful. I scrolled past Greece in June, Napa next month, a hotel suite in New York that cost more for a weekend than some people make in a month. My sister's cruise, my parents' anniversary trip, a standing reservation at a restaurant that pretends to have a dress code until it sees your last name. My thumb hovered. This, I thought, is what they think you are good for. Quiet money, an invisible engine, an open vein. If I were truly useless, I wouldn't be the one holding the keys. I logged into the brokerage portal and looked at the block of stock that had never been a gift, no matter how often they called it one. 19 million tethered to a last name that had learned to live off of mine. I didn't press sell, not yet. I wanted to feel the shape of the decision first. The valet knocked lightly on the window to ask if I needed directions. I waved him off, started the car, and pulled into the street. The city slid by, neon and brake lights, and a couple walking a golden retriever that kept turning back to lick their hands. At a red light, I glanced in the rearview mirror. Mascara held, shoulders square, voice steady when I tested it on a word that didn't belong to me yet. Enough. At home, I kicked off my shoes, set my clutch on the counter, and placed the phone beside it, face down. The room held its breath with me. When I picked the phone up again, it was not to plead or justify. It was to line up the dominoes, accounts, itineraries, the stake. If they see me as useless, then they won't miss what I take away. That's when I made the first move, and they had no idea what was coming. By the time I pulled into my parking garage, the city lights had taken on that hazy late-night shimmer. I stepped out of my Lexus, still wearing the satin dress from my sister's party, my heels clicking against the concrete. The sound echoed, sharp, empty, like the silence I'd been given at that dinner table. I let myself into my condo, a clean, open space with glass walls framing the Portland skyline. I dropped my clutch onto the kitchen counter and eased my feet out of the heels, leaving them by the door. The moment I shrugged off my coat, the warmth of home settled around me, but there was no comfort in it. Just focus. I crossed to the dining table where my laptop bag waited. My fingers brushed the zipper, and for a second, I just stood there listening to the hum of the city outside. If they thought tonight had left me powerless, they were about to learn otherwise. The zipper's rasp broke the quiet. I opened the laptop, its glow lighting my face. No hesitation, just a calm, deliberate click through the login. I navigated to the joint investment platform, the one my parents had leaned on for years without a thought to who made that money possible. One by one, I froze every account they had access to. The system pinged for confirmation. Each click felt like sealing another door they'd taken for granted would always be open. Then I moved to the travel bookings. Napa Valley for my parents, a 2-week Mediterranean cruise for my sister. With a few keystrokes, every trip disappeared. A faint smile tugged at my lips. They had no idea the ungrateful daughter they'd just humiliated was also the silent majority shareholder in the family's hospitality business. The same business they paraded as their legacy, while quietly enjoying the profits I'd built. The cursor blinked on my next screen, the brokerage account. I typed in my broker's direct number, cradling the phone between my shoulder and ear. It was late, but he picked up. his voice groggy. I need to initiate the sale of my stake in Cascade Hospitality, I said, steady and clear. $19 million. I want it handled discreetly and immediately. He paused. Meredith, once it's sold, there's no undoing this. You're sure? That's the point, I replied, pouring myself a glass of water while he confirmed the order. There was no tremor in my voice, only the kind of certainty you feel when you've already lived through the worst of someone's disrespect. While the digital paperwork moved, I stepped out onto the balcony. The winter air bit at my skin, the city sprawling below me like a living thing. Somewhere down there, my parents and sister were probably still laughing over the party. The kind of laughter that comes when you believe the person you just pushed aside will quietly take it. Inside, my laptop chimed, sale confirmed. The number glowed on the screen like a clean slate. I closed it and set it aside, my phone lighting up almost instantly. At first, a couple of calls from unknown numbers. Then my father's name appeared, then my aunt, then my father again. I didn't pick up. Instead, I turned the phone face down on the counter, letting it buzz against the granite while I reached for a bottle of wine. The cork came out with a soft pop. I poured a glass, walked back to the balcony, and leaned on the railing. Below, headlights moved like veins of light through the city streets. By morning, I murmured to the skyline, they'll understand the cost of throwing me out. By sunrise, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing, and the begging had only just begun. The light pouring through my windows was warm and golden, cutting across the marble countertops in streaks. My condo was quiet, except for the low hiss of the espresso machine. I sat at the kitchen island, robe tied loose at the waist, one leg crossed over the other. The phone, lying face up next to my coffee mug, lit up every few seconds like it was fighting for my attention. 96 missed calls, 12 hours. The family group chat was a mess, half the messages pleading, half accusing. I scrolled slowly, letting the words hit one by one. Sweetheart, we can talk about this, my Aunt Beverly typed. The same woman who once told me I was too cold to ever be loved. My uncle, who never remembered my birthday, was suddenly calling me princess. Then came the others. You're destroying us. Do you realize what you've done? Call me now. I took a slow sip of coffee. The bitterness was perfect. By the fifth call from my father, I decided to pick up. What did you do? He snapped, skipping any kind of greeting. His tone was clipped, the kind he used when a business deal fell through. I stirred a spoon of sugar into my cup. I took back what was mine. You've ruined the family's name, he barked. Your sister's engagement is all over the society pages, and now you've sabotaged her future. For what? Petty revenge? I let the silence stretch, the spoon resting in the mug. I could hear his breathing, sharp, irritated on the other end. You didn't think twice before humiliating me in public, I finally said. Why should I think twice before telling the truth? This isn't how families handle things, he said, his voice rising. That's funny, I said softly. Because what you did to me, that's not how families handle things either. I ended the call before he could answer. I had just set the phone down when the intercom buzzed. The concierge's voice came through, hesitant. Ms. Blackwood, your parents are in the lobby. They're asking to come up. I looked toward the elevator doors in the hallway, imagined them stepping out into my space like they owned it. Not today, Samuel, I said, my tone calm. Tell them I'm unavailable. There was a pause. Understood. The buzz cut off. I stood there for a moment, hands wrapped around my coffee, letting the heat sink into my palms, and without warning, an old memory crept in. Me at 19, standing outside my parents' house in a thin sweater in December, waiting for someone to answer the door. They were hosting one of their family-only dinners. I could see the light from the chandelier spilling onto the driveway, smell the roast through the door. My mother opened it just far enough to tell me, "We're keeping this private tonight." Then she closed it again. The cold I'd felt that night never really left. I turned back to the counter, pushing the memory away. My laptop was still there from last night. I opened it again, but this time I wasn't looking at accounts or investments. I opened a blank document, my fingers steady on the keys. The statement would be direct. No flowery language, no emotional appeal, just facts. I was announcing the sale of my stake in Cascade Hospitality and my full separation from the family business. My name would be off every contract, every public listing. The press would receive it before noon. They'd learn about it the same way I learned about my sister's engagement, through a public spectacle, surrounded by people with no way to hide their reaction. I glanced at the clock. 11:23. Enough time to send this and still pour myself another coffee before the world caught up. By the time my statement hit the press, my parents' perfect image was already starting to crack. By the time my statement hit the press, the first cracks in my parents' perfect facade were already spidering out in every direction. I stayed at the kitchen island, the laptop open in front of me. The words on the page were deliberate, measured enough to pass legal review, sharp enough to cut through any glossy narrative my family had ever spun. I typed slowly, pausing between sentences, letting each one carry its own weight. I will be selling my stake in Cascade Hospitality valued at approximately $19 million due to irreconcilable ethical differences. I have no further comment at this time. That part was clean, impersonal. But then came the lines my father would read twice, maybe 3 times, pretending not to feel the sting. I believe a business should be run with integrity, transparency, and respect for all contributors, past and present. Any deviation from these principles will inevitably erode trust. Not an accusation, not exactly, but we both knew what I was pointing at. I leaned back, reading the whole thing again. Every word felt steady, like I'd finally stopped letting them steer the narrative. I sent it to my attorney, Patricia, for a final pass. The wait was short. Her reply came less than 10 minutes later. It's perfect. No liability risk. Send it. I didn't hesitate. I highlighted every outlet in my media contact list, business journals, lifestyle magazines, even a couple of gossip sites that thrived on high society family feuds, and clicked send. The moment my finger left the trackpad, a strange calm washed over me. Then came the buzz, my phone lighting up with news alerts before I'd even closed the email tab. Blackwood heiress exits family empire. Meredith Blackwood cites ethical differences in shocking split. The headlines multiplied like wildfire. One headline in particular made my chest tighten. Not from fear, but from the vivid memory it stirred. Sources say rift began at sister's engagement party. In an instant, I was back in that ballroom, the air heavy with perfume and champagne. My sister's hand looped through our father's arm as they smiled for photographers. The moment the security guard's hand clamped on my elbow. "This way, ma'am." The rush of shame, the muffled laughter from my own mother, it burned even now. I let the memory fuel me, and the calm turned into something sharper. Hours later, the ripple effect was already reaching my parents' front door. The landline at their estate rang over and over, each call either a reporter fishing for comment or an old friend asking what on earth was going on. Camera crews lined the edge of their manicured lawn. I knew because one of those friends, more of a family spy really, texted me a photo. My sister, ever the strategist, posted a photo of herself holding a wine glass on the veranda, captioned, "Family above all." The comment section turned on her within minutes. "Is that why you humiliated your sister?" one wrote. Another, "Above all, unless there's money involved." She tried deleting the worst of them, but screenshots moved faster than her delete button. Meanwhile, my own phone buzzed with messages from cousins and second cousins I hadn't heard from in years. "You know, I've always had your back. I never agreed with what they did to you." The same people who sat silent at every slight were now rushing to rewrite their own histories. By mid-afternoon, the frenzy outside their home had thinned, but I knew it wasn't over, not even close. I carried a mug of tea to the window and settled into the armchair, watching the world move outside. Joggers passing by, a delivery guy balancing 2 boxes, a woman walking her dog in a pink coat. It was such an ordinary scene, almost surreal against the storm I'd just unleashed. That's when my phone buzzed again. This time, no name, no photo, just an unknown number. "You have no idea what you've started." I stared at the words for a long moment, the steam from my tea curling up into my face. Whoever sent it was right about one thing. This was only the beginning, and that single message was all it took for me to realize they weren't going to fight fair. 2 mornings later, I was halfway through my first cup of coffee when the concierge rang my unit. "Miss Blackwood, there's an urgent delivery for you from, I think it's a law office." His pause said enough. A few minutes later, I was standing in my doorway with a heavy cream-colored envelope in my hands, the kind with an embossed seal and far too much weight for good news. My name was printed in perfect block letters. The return address, my parents' lawyers. I carried it inside, set it on the counter, and slid it open with the same slow care I might use on a letter from the IRS. The first page was blunt. Notice of intent to pursue legal action. Apparently, I was guilty of breach of fiduciary duty, defamation of character, and intentional interference with ongoing business relationships. In plain English, they were accusing me of tanking deals and ruining the Blackwood name. I read the whole thing without blinking, then laid it flat on the marble. The edges curled slightly like the paper itself didn't have the spine to stand up to me. I couldn't help it. A smile tugged at the corner of my mouth. I'd been waiting for this. By late morning, I was seated at a quiet corner table in a small cafe with Patricia, my attorney. The place was calm, soft music in the background, the kind of spot where serious conversations feel less like war plans. She wore her usual charcoal gray suit and glasses, the kind of presence that makes opposing counsel sweat before she even speaks. We went through the letter line by line. She circled phrases with a red pen, muttering under her breath. Vague, unenforceable, no standing. This one's almost laughable. I slid a folder across the table. Contracts, board minutes, resignation letters, all signed and dated. Everything was done by the book, I said, and I've got backup copies in 3 places. Patricia flipped through the stack, her lips pressing into a thin, satisfied line. You've covered yourself well. Most of this is smoke, but, she tapped the table, we could do more than just swat this away. That's when she laid it out, filing a countersuit for wrongful removal from the board, hostile treatment, and reputational harm. They've been playing this game for years, she said. The difference is now you have the paper trail and the guts to hit back. I didn't even need to think it over. Do it and make sure our reply is polite, but sharp enough they feel the edge when they read it. By the time we walked out, the midday sun was bouncing off car hoods, and I felt lighter than I had in weeks. Not because it was over, far from it, but because I knew I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was moving first. That evening, back in my condo, I opened my private social account, the one with a select audience, people who either knew the truth or needed to. I typed one sentence, short enough to burn without giving away the match. When you play with fire, don't be surprised when the smoke follows you home. I hit post. The reaction was instant. Likes, shocked emojis, messages from people I hadn't spoken to since high school. And then my sister chimed in, her reply dripping with sugar. Some of us know how to keep family matters private. She might as well have handed me another exhibit for court. Every word she typed, every condescending tone just fed my case. I closed the app and set my phone face down, letting the city lights glow against the glass. The war wasn't just coming. It was already here. By the next morning, the smoke wasn't just in their home. It was all over the news. By the next morning, my phone looked like it had been through a storm. Over 100 unread messages, dozens of missed calls, and news alerts stacked one on top of another. I slid out of bed, wrapped myself in a robe, and padded into the kitchen. The smell of fresh coffee filled the air as I set the mug down beside my tablet. One tap on the screen, and there it was. My family's name, my face, and headlines that would have made my parents choke on their morning tea. Every major local outlet was covering it, and a few national business blogs had picked it up. The TV in the corner was on a morning news segment, and there she was, my mother, holding her designer purse like a shield, while walking past a cluster of reporters outside her gated driveway. No comment, she said, voice clipped, sunglasses hiding her eyes. She kept moving, but not fast enough to avoid the follow-up. Is it true you forced your daughter out of the company? Then came my sister speaking to a different camera crew outside what looked like a florist's shop. It's all a misunderstanding. Cassandra smiled only to trip over her next words. Well, she resigned because she wanted to focus on other things. Personal hobbies. I almost choked on my coffee. Personal hobbies. That was the best they could come up with. I sat there at the kitchen island eating toast and making mental notes of every inconsistency. If they couldn't keep their story straight in the first 24 hours, the cracks would widen fast. Around 10, my phone buzzed again. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but curiosity won. Meredith Blackwood? The voice asked. Yes? This is Ryan Mitchell from Business Tribune. Your father just got questioned at a real estate conference about your claims. I leaned back in my chair. And he tried to laugh it off, but when pressed, he said, "You were misinformed and acting out of emotion." Then when someone asked about the missing audit reports, he stammered, changed the subject, and blamed market conditions. It's making waves. I thanked him for the call, hung up, and for the first time that morning, I felt a sharp jolt of satisfaction. My father prided himself on being unshakable in public, and now he was fumbling in front of his peers. That would be remembered. Not long after, my inbox started lighting up with private messages. A former board member, someone who'd always kept a cautious distance, wrote, "I'm sorry for not speaking sooner. I saw things I shouldn't have stayed silent about. Call me when you can." An old contact from the financial department sent a spreadsheet with a short note. "You didn't approve these transactions, right?" One glance, and I knew half those deals had been made after my name was scrubbed from the internal approval chain. I took a slow breath, letting the pieces slide into place. I was no longer piecing together just my exit, but the pattern of what had been going on long before I left. By late afternoon, the sun dipped low, streaking gold across the buildings outside my window. That's when an email came in from an address I didn't recognize. Pacific Investigates. They wanted me to sit down for an on-record interview. They promised fairness, a chance to set the record straight. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I replied with a counteroffer. Meet your producer first. No cameras, no commitments. If they were serious, they'd agree. Within an hour, the response came. We'll arrange it tomorrow afternoon. I closed the laptop, poured myself another cup of coffee, and stood by the window, watching the city hum below. The noise outside was nothing compared to the noise building inside my family's carefully polished facade, and I had the patience to let it spread. What they showed me in that meeting turned my quiet plan into an all-out war. The next afternoon, I stepped into the quiet hum of an upscale restaurant, tucked away from the busy street. The hostess led me to a corner booth near a tall window where the producer from Pacific Investigates was already waiting. He stood as I approached, offering a polite handshake. "Thanks for agreeing to meet," he said, sliding into his seat again. We exchanged a few minutes of small talk, menu recommendations, the weather, until the server came by to take our orders. Only then did he lean slightly forward, lowering his voice. "I thought you should see this before we talk about anything else," he said, reaching into his messenger bag. From inside, he pulled a small, unmarked flash drive and set it gently on the table between us. I didn't reach for it. "What's on it?" His gaze flicked to the server refilling our water glasses, then back to me. "Internal documents. Someone in your family's circle passed them to us. They didn't want to be named, but they wanted you to have them." My fingers itched to snatch it up, but I kept my hands folded. "Why me?" "Because these don't just make for a story," he said. "They look personal, targeted." I nodded slowly, tucking the drive into my bag with no change in expression. "I appreciate it," I said, tone even, "but if I'm going to talk on record, I need to vet what's here first." We finished lunch without returning to the subject. When we parted outside, he left me with a simple, "Be careful." The warning lingered in my mind as I drove home. Evening had started to settle, the sky streaked with pale pink and gold. I parked, headed up to my condo, and locked the door behind me. Inside, the quiet felt heavier than usual. I set my bag on the counter, made myself a cup of tea, and carried my laptop to the couch. When I finally plugged in the flash drive, a folder popped open. Dozens of subfolders neatly labeled with dates and subjects. My pulse quickened. I clicked one at random. There they were. Records of wire transfers between company accounts and personal ones with my sister's name on them. Meeting minutes where my name had been erased from key decisions I knew I'd attended. And then worse, screenshots of text messages between my parents and sister. I forced myself to read each one even as the words burned. They joked about getting her out before she catches on. My sister bragged about how she'll believe whatever Dad says. My mother replied with a laughing emoji and wrote, "She's too trusting for her own good." I sat back, tea untouched, letting the weight of it settle. The timestamps lined up perfectly with the months before I was pushed out. By 9 a.m., I had opened every folder, every file. Shock had given way to something sharper, a clear, cold focus. I pulled a notepad from the drawer and started listing key points, arranging them into a timeline. Transfers, meeting edits, private communications, each one a piece of the larger pattern. When I was done, I scanned the notes into a secure folder, encrypted it, and sent a copy to my lawyer with one word in the subject line: insurance. Then I sat there for a long moment, tapping my pen against the table. I could have gone public right then, let the world see every dirty detail, but that would have given them a target to rally against. No, I wanted them off balance. I wanted them guessing. So I took a single screenshot from one of the text threads, a line where my sister had written, "She'll never have the guts to fight us." I cropped it tight so no other context showed, and attached it to a short message. "Want to explain this before I do?" I sent it to her personal phone and turned mine face down on the table. When I finally went to bed, the condo was dark and still. I didn't expect her to reply right away. But at 2 in the morning, my phone lit up. 5 long paragraphs spilling over with excuses, contradictions, and outright panic. And in between the lines, she confirmed more than she realized. Her reply came at 2 a.m. 5 paragraphs of panic that told me everything I needed to know. By morning, the sun was streaming through my blinds, but I was already at my desk with coffee in one hand and my laptop open. I read her message again, slowly this time, marking the parts where her excuses slipped into admissions. She couldn't even keep her own story straight, blaming Dad in one breath, then claiming it was just business in the next. I took screenshots, neatly labeling each one before sending them to my lawyer. I didn't rush. I wanted her and my parents to stew in their own words a little longer. By late morning, I'd moved to the kitchen table, flipping through the stack of notes I'd made from the flash drive. I'd barely finished my second cup when my phone buzzed. An alert from a news app I didn't even subscribe to. Breaking. Sources close to the matter reveal internal rift in prominent family-owned firm. I tapped it open. There they were, snippets of the very documents I'd read last night, carefully redacted to protect certain details but damning all the same. Wire transfers, meeting notes with my name scrubbed out, lines from text threads that mirrored the ones I had in full. The byline belonged to a journalist known for airtight sourcing. I didn't have to wonder who leaked it. The producer's sources were working faster than I'd imagined. Within an hour, my phone was lighting up. Friends, old colleagues, even a distant cousin I hadn't spoken to in years. My sister's name was trending locally, right alongside my father's. The quotes in the article were sharp enough to cut glass, and each one was anchored with enough proof that denying them outright would make them look even worse. Around noon, I turned on the TV. A local news anchor was speaking over footage of my parents at a charity gala last spring, smiling for cameras. The headline running beneath them read, "Family business under scrutiny amid allegations of mismanagement." I muted the volume and just watched their faces on the screen. The poise looked brittle now. By mid-afternoon, the chaos had spilled into the company itself. A former coworker texted me, "People are losing it in the boardroom. Nobody knows what's coming next." Then came the video. Someone inside had filmed Dad at a private meeting weeks ago, leaning back in his chair saying, "We had to push her out to keep control in the family." The way he said family made it clear he didn't mean me. I watched it twice. The sound quality wasn't perfect, but it didn't have to be. The damage was done. By evening, more leaks were popping up from inside the company. Emails, policy changes, even budget notes showing my sister approving expenses she'd later denied signing. I stayed quiet, letting the storm build on its own. Sometimes the best move is to stand still and watch your opponents exhaust themselves. Just after 9, my phone rang. The caller ID said, "Home." The old landline number my parents had kept for decades. I almost let it go to voicemail, but curiosity won. Dad's voice came first, measured like he was trying too hard to sound calm. "We need to talk," he said. "Not over the phone, in person." Mom chimed in, her tone sharper. "This has gone far enough. We can work something out if you're willing to be reasonable." I didn't answer right away. I let the silence stretch just long enough to make them shift in their seats wherever they were. "I'm listening," I said finally. They laid out vague ideas, settling things quietly, avoiding more embarrassment. Not a word about making it right. Not one apology. When they paused, waiting for me to agree, I kept my voice steady. "If we meet, it'll be on my terms. My lawyer's office. That's the only place this conversation happens." Dad exhaled hard like I just told him his check had bounced. Mom muttered something under her breath, but I caught the word, ungrateful. "I'll have my attorney reach out," I said, and ended the call. I set my phone down, the quiet rushing back into the room. For the first time in months, it felt like the balance was shifting. I told them I'd meet on my terms in my lawyer's office. They hated that more than the headlines. 1 week later, I stepped off the elevator into the 27th floor lobby, the hum of the city muted by thick glass walls. The receptionist gave me a polite nod before leading me to the conference room. Through the glass door, I could already see them. Mom in her pearl earrings, Dad with his arms crossed, and my sister fidgeting with her phone. Their faces were tight like they'd been practicing a united front, but had run out of steam. My lawyer Douglas stood when I walked in. "Meredith," he said, gesturing to the seat at his right. I set my bag down, took my time sitting, and opened the leather-bound folder I'd brought. The air in the room felt like it had weight to it. Douglas didn't waste time. "We're here to settle this in a way that avoids further damage for everyone. These are the terms." His voice was calm, clipped, the kind of tone that didn't invite debate. He slid a document across the table. 1. You sign over all remaining stake in the company to my client, effective immediately. 2. You issue a joint public statement clearing her name. 3. Repayment of the funds in question documented here within 60 days. Dad leaned forward, his knuckles white. "This is robbery," he said. "We built that company together." "No," I said evenly. "I built my part while you two erased me from it. This is correction, not theft." Mom gave a thin laugh, the kind she used at country club luncheons. "You're still our daughter. We don't have to be enemies." She reached for some long-forgotten sentiment. "Remember the summer at the lake house? You and your sister." "Stop." My voice cut through hers. "You can list every picnic and every Christmas morning, but none of it erases what you did in the boardroom or the lies you told to keep me out." My sister finally spoke. "We just wanted unity." "By throwing mine in the trash?" I asked. "You didn't protect the family. You protected your control." For a moment, no one moved. The ticking of the wall clock was the only sound. Douglas cleared his throat. "The choice is simple. Sign or we proceed with the pending suits, and the press gets the rest of what we have." They glanced at each other. That silent exchange of people who know they're cornered. Dad grabbed the pen first, his signature quick and hard like he wanted it over with. Mom hesitated but followed. My sister's hand shook as she signed, her eyes fixed on the table. No one said, "I'm sorry." I didn't need them to. Douglas gathered the documents, slid them into a folder stamped complete, and locked it in his briefcase. "We'll handle the rest," he said quietly to me. I stood, pushing in my chair with deliberate care. "We're done here." Outside, the late afternoon light was already starting to fade. I didn't rush home. Instead, I drove along the coast, windows down, the salt air cutting through the last of the tension. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the sky had turned a deep, glowing orange. I kicked off my shoes at the door and walked straight to the deck. The ocean stretched out in front of me, endless and steady, waves catching the last gold of the day. I sat, letting the wood beneath my bare feet warm me. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't replaying their words or planning my next move. The papers were signed. The stake was mine. The truth was public. They had taken years from me, but they never took my will. I thought about how small their world would feel now. Tight, guarded, full of shadows they'd created themselves. Mine was wide open, the horizon blurred where sea met sky, and I realized I didn't need to look back anymore. This is where my story ends, but maybe yours begins.